Hey y'all, and welcome to Geospatial Experiences. I'm your host, Melissa Mayo, and I'm an Esri engineer on the product team. This podcast focuses on the application of geographic information. Let's go on a journey together with some of my amazing coworkers, along with Esri customers, partners, and distributors who are doing really cool work in the field of GIS. I'm super excited about this episode of Geospatial Experiences. We have a really fun guest today. We're going to have a really great conversation. I know I always enjoy chatting with this person when I get to run into him at a conference. So I'm just super excited about today. So Chris Kelly from Clearion is visiting with us. He's joining us for the podcast. Thanks for coming, Chris. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Melissa.
I'm so excited to chat with you. We're going to have a really good conversation. I have some fun things to ask you about today. So I'm happy that everybody's going to get to hear about your story.
Great.
I appreciate you. So we'll just jump right in and get going. That's okay.
Absolutely.
Awesome. We start all of the episodes off with asking people about their geospatial journey. So I want to do the same thing with you. Tell us about yourself, your geospatial journey. How did you come to be the CEO of a successful geospatial company?
Myself all the time. No, it's a kind of a strange story in a lot of ways. Intend to get into this industry. Started college with the with the idea that I was going to be an electrical engineer, and then I realized how much math and science engineers have to take, and kind of went in a different direction. I studied economics and political science in college. So it's probably not the classical story for a tech CEO. I had a computer in the 80s, and I got my first email address when I started college in 1991. So I was just kind of always interested in technology. Even though I went to an engineering school, Georgia Tech, and got basically a liberal arts degree at an engineering school. It's just kind of hard not to take in technology by osmosis. I ended up just kind of randomly going to work for a small engineering company, a small electrical engineering firm. It was my first job out of college. I was planning to go back to grad school and was really just looking for something to do for a year and a half. And I started working in the field, doing safety inspections on pole lines, and the next thing I knew was building an access database application, get away from paper. But we're still we had these paper maps that the utilities would print out, and we had to associate the data that we were entering into the database that I built, with the pole on the map. And so we had drawing little lines and using pencil to, kind of annotate these poles. And so I really kind of very early on, this is in the mid 90s, kind of saw the applications for geospatial technology in the field. I didn't know it was called that. But really kind of got firsthand experience with it. And I continued with this firm, and it started to grow, and we had customers they're asking us if we would digitize their paper maps into the computer. At the time, the standard in the industry was to do that in AutoCAD. So there's a company in St. Louis called Gentry Systems, and a lot of utilities had this expectation that they wanted their maps in AutoCAD. I met this guy from this company called Esri in 1999, and he said, "Why are you doing this in AutoCAD? You should try to do it and so I think it was Arc Info 8.0 beta. We got a seat, talked to one of our customers into letting us put all that data into GIS instead of into AutoCAD. And then we realized, needed a connectivity model to feed OMS and engineering analysis. So we hired some software developers and an extension to I'm going to call it ArcGIS Desktop, but extension to ArcMap, right around 2000, 2001. We grew the company to, I think we had about 125 customers that were using our desktop extension for network modeling and the geometric network, and map book printing and integrating with pole line design, or what they called staking in this electric co-op industry. And I met my current co-founder, the guy that I started Clearion with. We met at that company, and we were chatting in 2005, 2006. Maybe we should try to do this on our own. We jumped out of that company and decided to start Clearion.
That's awesome. You have a very entrepreneurial spirit there.
I guess so. Yeah. I really, and we might talk about this more about like the technology, but I was really, drawn to, meeting, people in the industry. One of the cool things that we did, the company that we were with at the time was called Origin Geosystems. I set up these 4-hour seminars, all the Esri utility sales reps across the country, and we would pick a city in a state, or if the state was really big, we'd pick two, and help us invite all the utilities in the area. And we were focused on the smaller utilities. They would rent the meeting room at a hotel, and then my company would buy the lunch, and we'd have people come in. We'd do demos from like 10 to noon, an Esri demo. We would demo our product. We'd feed everybody lunch and do Q&A, and then they'd all go back, and we met most of the small utilities in America that way. It was really great, and I just loved being out and solve problems.
You always seem like you've enjoyed talking to the customer groups and hearing their problems, hearing the things that they needed solving, and being able to kind of expose them to a new way of potentially coming up with solutions for that. That's always seemed like that was really engaging for you.
I still love it, and it's funny that we picked vegetation management kind of as the business problem that we wanted to solve, because we knew electric utilities, we knew GIS. We really wanted to do something in the field. We wanted to do something with mobile, and we'd heard our customers talking about vegetation management, and we thought, well, that sounds easy. I mean, it's trees, how hard could it be? That's how naive we were. We really do personally love solving problems in this industry that I've been around since 1995, which is kind of mind blowing. We picked something that we thought was like a kind of an easy way to wade into field operations, and it turned out to be much more complicated than we expected.
Aren't most things though, really, when you get down to it? I feel like that's how it always goes.
Yes, exactly.
So let's talk about Clearion a little bit more. Talk about the company and really what you guys do. And I know you mentioned vegetation management was the business problem you wanted to solve, but go into a little bit more detail about that if you'd like.
So we really were looking for something that wasn't just like a kind of a all-purpose field GIS tool. We wanted to come at this not just as a technology company, but building a solution from the beginning. And so we started building our field application in 2007, and it was really designed for people that were basically building vegetation work plans in the field. And it was we had no idea how big of an opportunity this was for a business. We didn't know if it was going to be just like really niche and maybe something that my co-founder and I ran by ourselves for a long time and enjoyed it, or we just didn't really know the scope of the challenge and the need. Again, just this was not any sort of brilliant insight that we had, that vegetation management was really poised to become a much bigger area of focus for utilities than it was. But kind of around the time that we were thinking about starting Clearion in 2006 and into 2007, the U.S. and Canadian government was putting together a report on the 2003 blackout. A lot of bad things happened for that blackout to be as big and prolonged as it was. But the conclusion was that the very first bad thing that happened was that on a hot day, one of the hottest days of the year, transmission lines sagged down into a tree that was growing into the right of way. And so, vegetation management became like this regulated thing for utilities, in a way that it really hadn't been before. And not to say that it wasn't, professionally managed, but it got a level of scrutiny, and a potential $1 million a day fine attached to it. And so much of it was just about, documentation and being able to prove that, prove to the regulators, at least on the transmission side, that you had, followed your plan, like you inspected all of your lines, and that you did all the work that resulted from those inspections or those plannings. So, it quickly evolved from just being like a field work planning tool to almost like a program management, project management, or work management challenge. And so, that was in the early days. We were helping typically large utility companies, particularly transmission companies, meet those new NERC regulations that had come out as a result of the 2003 blackout.
That was definitely an impactful event. I was trying to think of a good way of putting it.
Yes.
And as far as the transmission companies, I mean, it really changed a lot of things for them as far as how they had to look at their vegetation management practices and policies, procedures, and the regularity with with which they had were regulated to be able to do a lot of that stuff. So it seems like you guys were coming in, I hate to say at the perfect time, but it kind of aligned perfectly. Not that you orchestrated a blackout, Chris, but
Correct. It was lucky timing, in a lot of ways. Really salient drivers in the industry. So we actually grew pretty quickly. I mean, again, we had no idea like if this was going to be a two-person company for a long time. That we had pretty quickly, within a few years, we were working with quite a number of large utilities, and working with small utilities, working with some of the contractor companies that were also trying to help their customers solve these problems. It was a really dynamic and exciting time. And one of the things that we discovered very early on is that, unlike the experience that we had, building tools to manage a geometric network for distribution utilities, where for the most part our customers could do things exactly the same way. This is how you model a transformer. This is how you model your reclosers. When we got into vegetation management, we found there's just this really wide variance from utility to utility on exactly how they think about the problem, how they manage the work, and how they therefore have to manage the data about the work. And even we went into a couple of utilities where the transmission vegetation department had completely different business practices, contracting methods than the distribution group at the same utility. So we had to really figure out how to be super flexible to still have like a COTS application. We didn't want to build custom code every new place that we went, but we had to figure out how to make that flexible and configurable. And that was one of the big initial challenges that we had to solve. But what it ended up doing is it forced us to make the software so flexible that we were ultimately able to do other things beyond vegetation management.
Well, and I was about to ask you, how's the business evolved since you started it? And it sounds like you've been able to move into some other spaces because of making the software so flexible.
Yeah, the business it's evolved in a lot of ways. There's a lot of it that's technological. There's a lot of it that's being driven by just the market dynamics or the changes in the industry that are occurring. I think that like the one way that the business has evolved has been in the early days, maybe 15 years ago. Yeah, the vegetation management department was kind of often this just thorn in the utility side, right? I mean, it was like this thing we have to do, but it wasn't like the core business of selling electrons and engineering transmission and distribution systems. And it didn't typically have like much of an IT profile. Like if the vegetation management department needed software, if they wanted to move beyond just managing their business on spreadsheets, a lot of times the projects, like maybe they would have like a little IT capital budget, but they were still just kind of looked at as these niche systems. And today the projects that we do, I mean, they're very much seen as an integral part of an IT and GIS strategy. So just the profile of these projects, the size of the projects, the number of integration points with other systems has really grown. What hasn't changed, interestingly, is the first transmission project that we did in 2008. Remote sensing was there. The transmission company that we're working with, already had a LiDAR program, to meet these NERC requirements for vegetation management and some other engineering related requirements. So remote sensing's been there. It kind of feels new in a lot of ways because there's so much activity around remote sensing, so much investment going on, and no question, a lot of innovation still. But the remote sensing piece wasn't new, and the nature of vegetation management being so heavily outsourced was there from the beginning. So when you go into a utility and let's say they're going to have 100 or 250 people using software for vegetation management, it's possible that only like 10 or 15% of those users are actually employees of the utility and everybody else is outsourced. So those are some of the things that haven't evolved, but just the kind of the scrutiny, the attention that utilities are giving, and the seriousness with which they're looking at native geospatial work management tools, as part of a broader company strategy that fits within their overall GIS strategy, is definitely something that has changed a lot over the years.
I'm thinking, Chris, as you're talking. So, what kind of companies? What do companies bring you guys in to do? I guess that's the question I'm wanting to explore a little bit more with you. So, what kind of specific problems would someone bring Clearion in for? I know obviously anything circulating around the vegetation management space, but what do people come to you and say, "Hey, Chris, I had this going on. Can you help me solve it?"
Yeah, so vegetation management, we really focused on that problem from the beginning, and we really built our brand around it. And the majority of our of companies over the past 15 years, 17 years, will come to us because they have a specific challenge around vegetation management. That started to change a little bit in the last couple of years, but it typically starts there. And there's so many areas, there's so many challenges in vegetation management. What we've built, with these Esri development tools, that really allow our solutions to live within the broader Esri ecosystem. They can address a lot of those different challenges. It could be budget, reporting, compliance, fire risk, customer service, field worker safety. And typically a utility will have like one or two things that are really their main pain points. If they've had a fire that was where like the vegetation management program, might have been involved or implicated, or if there's like new fire risk regulations coming that pertain to vegetation management, that'll be maybe like the triggering event for utility to get a modern digital natively geospatial vegetation work management system. But so many times that can evolve, where you get your core problem solved, and then you will start to look at all of the other areas of your vegetation management program that can benefit from digital technology. More recently, we've seen utilities are coming to the market and looking for products that can do more than just one thing, right? So if they're looking for a vegetation management solution, they want to make sure it's not just a vegetation management tool. They want to make sure that the investments they're making in vendor relationships and platform technology can be leveraged more broadly. One of the other interesting things that we've seen over the years is after there was a big outage, a snowstorm related outage in Connecticut that was a really prolonged event during a very cold time, and then that was kind of followed fairly quickly by Superstorm Sandy, and the industry was just becoming very focused on emergency preparedness and damage assessment capabilities, and that was just obviously a map-based problem to solve. And I think that the initial idea was to have a purpose-built, dedicated damage assessment tool that utilities could use when they have large-scale storm events. For a variety of reasons, today we're seeing more and more people, more and more utilities wanting to have field operations software that can work in both like a blue sky kind of normal mode of operation, but also be used during storms. So we're having more conversations around that, and then seeing, probably because there needs to be so much interaction both in blue sky operations and in storm operations, interaction between the asset inspection and maintenance group and the vegetation management group. We're seeing more interest in having a single application suite that can solve both of those, both the vegetation related and the asset related field inspection and maintenance management challenges.
Mm-hmm. So, Chris, it seems like vegetation management became a topic that was just really interesting to you, and you really identified, a need and a gap in the industry for a solution that would help, utility companies to be able to solve problems there. What about it was, so interesting to you, and what can you talk about as far as the vegetation management space today? What can you tell us about how things are going for veg management today?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that was exciting, from the beginning was just there was so much to learn. Again, that naive idea that we had of, it's trees, how hard could it be? I mean, we were very quickly corrected in that naive assumption, but it turned out to be what makes it so interesting, and the pace of change that's occurring today it's even faster, and I think that a lot of that is related to having a lot more dynamic biological environment in a lot of ways. So I think a lot of the changes that are happening in the vegetation management industry, globally, and certainly here in the U.S., is being driven by wildfires and grid resilience as it's related to increasing number and severity of natural disasters, storms, etc. There is a lot more focus today, environmental issues, pertaining to utility and other rights of way, rail, highway systems, pipeline rights of way. The grid resiliency questions become so much more, even more interesting and potentially complicated when you look at the move to really electrify more of our economy and what that's going to mean for needing more capacity for transmission, more just public demand for reliability. Working from home is maybe kind of a small example of that, but things are changing so fast. And one of the things that we're really focused on over the last several years is looking at how environmental concerns, sustainability, just these broad environmental and sustainability topics, have really become a part of utility and more broadly, infrastructure field operations. So there's some really fascinating things, and I think very positive things that are going on that really align kind of culturally and personally with just the people, with many of the people at Clearion that just are interested and professionally inclined to help solve some of these issues. But you've got vegetation management conferences now where 50% of the agenda could be about environmental and sustainability topics, which just was not the case a decade ago when we were getting into this. The other thing that's happening in the space is, I mentioned before that remote sensing is not new, but there's some big things going on in the remote sensing space. A lot of investment that's coming in to be able to leverage satellite imagery to do vegetation analytics. I would say that is probably one of the fastest changes that we've seen probably in the 30 years that I've been in the electric industry, which is pretty well known for its measured pace of change, I guess we could say. And the satellite-based vegetation analytics has really moved much more quickly through the market. And what Clearion does in the vegetation management world is downstream from those technologies. So we need to be able to, create a home, we say operationalize the data that comes from remote sensing and satellite analytics. And then what's not changing is the degree to which vegetation management and other types of field operations work is outsourced. And we're seeing, for a lot of reasons, for efficiency, for safety, that contractors need access to data and they need real-time collaboration tools. So that's driving a lot of really fun and exciting changes in our market. And one of the things that we heard in the early days is that software might come into the utility vegetation management world. People would sort of grant that, like, yeah, maybe we need some software and not just do this on spreadsheets. But it was well known, well understood among the veterans of the industry 10 or 15 years ago that the people that are actually doing the work, the people that are running the chainsaws and the chipper trucks and the bucket trucks, they will never use software. And that has not been a prediction that's stood the test of time. We're definitely seeing this technology being pushed down to the field worker level and really driving a lot of benefits and surprisingly positive adoption among many of them.
That's awesome. I think that's great. You may not be able to go into specifics, but are there interesting projects that you can tell us about that Clearion has been involved with?
Yeah, one of the projects that was very interesting for me was the first time one of our utility customers decided to push technology out to the field crew level. And what it ended up doing is it brought this new perspective, into the implementation project and the ongoing relationship with this utility, because again, the majority of their users were, contractor field supervisors and actually crew leaders. It was painful because it was so early. You think about, you know, we didn't have a contractor app at the time, so we didn't think the market was ready, so we ended up installing our very powerful Arc Engine based applications on expensive and very slow ruggedized laptops, in 2009, 2010, and training field crews with it. But we really got to know that side of the business a lot more, the actual contractor perspective. The other thing that comes to mind is it's maybe a little bit of a strange thing to bring up on an Esri podcast, but I think it's interesting and I think instructive to see how geospatial technology and geospatial data, has these like connections to other clearly non-spatial things. So we're seeing there's a project in particular where our utility customer, they've got a big contractor community across multiple states, and they spend a lot of money on vegetation management. I think when you start measuring your budget on how many millions of dollars a week do you spend on something, those are pretty big budgets, and dealing with just getting invoices paid and getting everything accounted for in the right way has been a huge problem for so many people and so many utilities, and it's also a problem for the contractors. So we're working with utility that's really leaning into that problem and using the data in the Clearion platform, which is by definition Esri data, geospatial data, and the way that it's connected to the underlying network, and the way that regulatory reporting needs to be done from a transmission perspective, but then tying that to financial payments. So so we have a customer that's using our software to really manage not just the budget, but the actual payment of invoices to its contractors on a weekly basis. And the contractors now have access to the platform through our web product to actually be able to submit invoices and be able to see what the payment status is. And that payment status is so often tied to were there any rework tasks that were identified in the system but maybe haven't been completed, or the rework was completed but not reported, and all of that's so inherently geospatial. But the actual business problem of managing invoices is not. But there's a couple things that come to mind.
I do think that's really neat, though, that you guys are working in that space. And I wonder if the fact that you have so much experience with the geospatial problems they're trying to solve. So the types of data and the information that's going to be in the databases and the things that they're referencing, I mean, they've got invoices associated with some type of work. And sometimes that can be hard to charge to if you don't understand the type of work that's being done. So do you feel like the experience that you have with the work being done helps you be able to put together an application that helps them better solve the problem on the invoicing side? I hope that question makes sense. It makes sense in my head.
Yeah, one of the other things that we see is, when you take something, we take vegetation management, it's oftentimes, it's a bit of a cliche, but still true, and that it's oftentimes the largest single line item, in the O&M budget of a utility. So it's expensive. It's getting more expensive because of labor and increasing regulations. And there is a real drive towards efficiency, and a lot of times that happens through the procurement processes, where you might have innovations around what are we actually paying for, right? So you could say we're going to pay for 20% of our overhead line miles to be trimmed to a specification. Maybe it's 10 feet on either side of the overhead conductor. We're going to pay for 20% of our overhead line miles. But you might also decide you want to pay for actual unitized work. We're going to pay this amount for a single tree trim and this amount for removal, and we're going to pay a different amount for mechanical trimming, et cetera. And so being able to track the plan and track the work as it relates to those different contract methods is really important, and it's been one of the big challenges that we've worked to solve, and I think it does give utilities something very concrete. It's not just what percentage of the work do we think the contractors are done with? 25, 50, 75, 100, but it's like span by span work tracking that we make very easy, and looking at individual tasks or even repeating tasks, work that needs to be done over and over again, can be tied back to budgets and invoice management. And I think it really does streamline the back office in a lot of ways.
I'm sure it definitely does. Absolutely. So I think you've got an interesting tactic to help the customers solve their problems for sure. So when you and I were at IMGIS back in the fall, you had just been on a really interesting trip to New Zealand, if I remember correctly. Can you walk us through that and tell us why you were there and all of the fun things that went on? You had some interesting stories about it, Chris.
Yeah. All right. Cool. I love talking about New Zealand. So thanks for asking that. So we got our first customer in New Zealand 10 years ago. And the general manager of one of the utilities from New Zealand came over to a vegetation management conference in the U.S. and he had a piece of paper where he'd handwritten his requirements for vegetation management software, because they were having some challenges, and he came to the booth and showed me the piece of paper and said, "Can you guys do this?" And I said, "I think we can." So we got our first customer in New Zealand, and we built a small user community over there, and but I'd never been. And then we began talking with the Esri distributor in New Zealand, Eagle Technology, and we ended up establishing like a formal reseller distributor relationship between Clearion and Eagle. So they became our feet, our boots on the ground, the face of Clearion in New Zealand, and they have an annual user conference, kind of legendary, the New Zealand Esri User Conference, and we decided it was time to go, and so we sponsored the event, and we popped across the Pacific. Mm-hmm. It's a long way away, we spent pre-conference seminars. We had a booth, and it was great. New Zealand's not a big place in terms of population. I think the metropolitan Atlanta area, the region where I live, is actually bigger in terms of population than the country of New Zealand. But they had like 800 people at their event, and we had been doing work in transportation, in the transportation space, in the water space. We just met all of these users and all of these business partners. It was cool. And one of the things I have to say is that Eagle is famous in this world that we're in this Esri world that we're in for their party the last night of the event. And I had heard this, and I had heard that, you know, we need to bring costumes because it's a costume party. And I said, okay. But I didn't really appreciate how serious the Kiwis are about their costume party until we got there, and it was great. They had a comedian who was like a famous celebrity that was the MC, and they had a costume contest. And I have never seen so much thought and just design and execution of costumes, and it was a lot of fun. So, you know, they've built this fantastic Eagle Technology has built like a really special community there, and they're very serious about GIS and solving problems. I think one of the things that we were excited about is we had this kind of intuition that the environmental and sustainability solutions that we had been working on, you know, to bring, you know, into our products and help our customers be prepared, you know, for these initiatives that we saw coming in North America, is we felt like, you know, these are going to be very well received in New Zealand. It was just our instinct, that the country gave a lot of attention to environmental issues, and you know, kind of like with the costume party that Dwayne Eagle and his company put on. It's like we thought it, you know, we had an idea that it was going to be, you know, kind of a big deal, but we didn't really appreciate it until we got there. But New Zealand has they have a national goal to become what they call predator free by 2050. And what that means is it's really about biosecurity. They want to protect native plants and animals from invasive species, and they're taking it very, very seriously. And that would really, you know, just that idea when you fly into New Zealand, you know, their main concern is, do you have any plants that you're bringing into our country that you shouldn't? And do you possibly have some seeds on your shoes? When I left New Zealand, I actually flew back through Sydney and Australia. And when I landed in Australia, they were asking me the same questions, like, where have you walked in your shoes? You know, that you're wearing. Yeah, it was really intense, but it just really shows, you know, their commitment to you know, preserving native plants and animals. And they've had some major problems with indigenous plants, including like the national bird of New Zealand really being threatened in a major way. But they've got this idea of biosecurity as really, you know, protecting these indigenous plants and animals, that I thought was really cool. And I think we're seeing more of that in the US. But yeah, if you haven't been to New Zealand, you should go.
It is a bucket list place. Absolutely. Sign me up, Chris.
Yeah, it was, you know, it's the classic, you know, you go somewhere that you love, and you know, you think, oh, I'm moving here, no doubt. I could definitely see myself living here. But I was, you know, texting my wife, you know, you guys really need to get here. We could spend a summer here.
Yeah.
But it's great. It's great. Wonderful people. It's absolutely beautiful. And really just, you know, the degree of professionalism there, I think, relative, you know, to the size, I think the size of the country and even the size of the organizations. I mean, these are a lot of what we would consider small utilities, and they're really punching above their weight in terms of the processes and the way that they think about utility vegetation management, asset management, land management, and beyond. So it's a great community there. Esri's got an incredible presence there through your distributor Eagle, and just a really wonderful and impressive group of people running that country.
We need to get plugged in for sure. I need to know people. I need to connect.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we are talking about transitions this season on the podcast, and I know you started with hands-on in the technology, and you've shifted to management. What was it like to move from being in the weeds, using the technology yourself, to managing a team of people who do the heavy lifting?
Right. Great question. I mean, the first thing I could say is it's embarrassing how poorly I know the technology now, like as an end user. I loved, I loved the hands-on nature of it in the beginning. And when we, when we were getting started, uh, my co-founder, he's an incredible software architect engineer, and I was very lucky to have a co-founder who who could do all of the technical stuff. And so I was out at conferences with customers, with prospects, and just trying to figure out what the heck is this thing that we need to build and that we need to put together for the market. And so there were times where I might be at a hotel and finish up meetings and dinner, and on well, it wasn't Zoom at the time, but like on a go-to meeting, in the late aughts, 2008, 2009, and we're talking about new functionality, or we need to do something for a demo tomorrow that it's really important that we be able to show this thing. And I would wake up in the morning, and my co-founder would have added functionality, and I would install the new software, and occasionally I'd have time to test it before the demo, but sometimes I would actually just test it during the demo. And it was fast paced, and it was great. I loved that. I enjoyed being the salesperson, and then running the kickoff meetings, and then running UAT, and then doing training. And there were a couple of projects where it was actually wearing that many hats. Now we have around 60 people on our team, and it's very different. But the really cool thing about it is that as the industry has changed, as the industry has gone through these transitions, of these field operations tools are kind of these niche, very specialized, a lot of times under the radar of IT and GIS, departmental solutions. As that transition has happened, where this is really part of the IT stack, and then as the transition of utilities wanting their contractors to be onboarded into these field enabled applications, that transition has occurred. The transition to the cloud, it's not 100% in the cloud, but certainly when we started in 2007, we didn't have a cloud strategy at the time. But we have a big group of people that just manage cloud infrastructure for our products, and we still do on-premise deployments, but so much of it's moved to the cloud. The transition to apps in the app store that everybody demands now, and contractor BYOD, and all of the cybersecurity challenges that come with all of those things, the amount of learning that's going on. We've just got this incredible team that's on the front lines of so many different parts of the business, and it's inspiring, to watch them. They're, for the most part, to a person, so much smarter than me, and it's definitely a very different job, but I feel like it just put us in a position to do so much more for our customers and to look for other problems and the utility and broader infrastructure industry that we can solve.
As Clearion has grown, what type of culture have you cultivated there? What is it like to work for Chris?
You know, I love that, you know, that the startup days, right? When we were moving fast and, you know, you can't move as fast, when you've got a big customer base and a big team but we really do, we try to move, you know, as quickly as we can and really lean into, you know, the challenges of the market. You know, the thing that I think the people that love Clearion are comfortable, like the people that love to work at Clearion are comfortable with the challenges. I mean, you know, you've worked at a utility. It's not an easy business, and making software work for anyone, especially when you're solving something complex, you know, is challenging. And then trying to make software work for a really challenging business where the rules are getting changed on you all the time, like our utility customers are. Um, you know, you've got to be curious and you've got to be energetic and adaptable and you know, you've got to really care about the customer problems. And so that, you know, that's the kind of culture that I think it just required, you know, to be successful in this industry. You know, there's this idea in software. I don't know, yeah, it's, exactly how to say it. But it's like, you know, a software company needs to tell their customers what they need, right?
Mhm.
It's like, and I've heard that over the years, and you know, there can be a partnership in figuring out how to solve problems, but I mean, I can't walk into a utility and like just tell them what they need. It has to be collaborative, right? And
It's
you
not
have to
going to
be
go well if you do.
right, and not to mention it's not going to go well. But it's just not, you know, it's also just not accurate in my mind. Like I think it's true that, you know, when we get into projects with utilities, like they are solving a problem for the first time in a lot of cases. That they're faced with something new, whether it be, you know, wildfire risk in a part of the country that's never been considered a wildfire risk area, you know, or environmental regulations, or, you know, ESG reporting, that's trickling down into, you know, field operations. I mean, I think our customers are solving problems for the first time, which is in a lot of ways strange for an industry that, you know, is 100 years old. Um, but I think it's true. So I think that having that empathetic, you know, collaborative approach, it's how I believe we have to work in the industry. I think it's the only way to really be successful.
Well, you're managing a geospatial company and technology changes super quickly. So you're in a tech field and the technology is changing. What are the challenges that you face in a dynamic environment like that? And how does Clarion keep up with emerging technologies and trends and all of these changes that seem to happen so fast, you know?
Yeah, it's easy. I mean, you just have to like run as fast as you can all the time, paddle as hard as you can to keep your head above water. It's all predictable. No, it's remarkable. The the changes. I mean, just trying to think about like where to start. I mean, we went through the change, of we did a major platform modernization over the last, um, almost 6 years when we started, where we moved from, you know, our legacy, approach of integrating with Esri and leveraging, you know, what are now legacy, you know, software developer SDKs, to you know, to the modern Esri, tech stack. Um, And so that was a massive change, but it's kind of one of those you hope like generational changes. Like the ArcGIS engine technology that we were built on, really kind of trace that back to like, you know, the time I got started in Esri, like, Arc Info 8.0 beta. It's kind of that roughly the same, technology. And now with runtime and JavaScript API, and ArcGIS Enterprise, I really do think that was more like a generation, once in a generation change, that we've worked through, and it's been fantastic. I mean, the partnership with Esri has truly been collaborative, and when you have SDK product managers, asking what else do you need in the Esri platform in order to solve your customers' problems. I mean, that's an awesome partnership. And we still have those meetings, but we have a lot fewer requests. So to me, that says like the Esri components of this platform technology are really have matured. They're so much more scalable and so much easier to deploy. So just that's kind of one part of the change, but like underneath all of that and around that kind of Esri platform transition that we went through, I mean, things are changing so fast. And you look at, building cross-platform maps with one code base that compile across, Windows, Apple, and Google's, public stores. There's a lot of change happening there, a lot of change happening around, like as I mentioned before, cybersecurity. We just went through our first SOC 2 compliance. Just the rules of engagement and the scrutiny of cybersecurity, and just running a professional, you know audit accredited organization. There's a lot to keep up with there. And we have to do a lot of there's a lot of R&D. There's a lot of just learning, reading, going to conferences, and seeing where not just the Esri technology is going, but where the whole enterprise tech stack is going. And I can say that if we didn't have such an incredible team, it would be certainly not anything that I can do on my own. But kind of what it has done is just when you have products that are solving a core business challenge, right? When you go into an organization and they've got a regulatory driver, or a budgetary driver to have a digital platform to manage their work. And when those technologies are accessible, they're websites instead of desktop apps, or they're cross-platform apps that can be installed on any device, and even be secured through an MDM. The ideas that come out of that, like once you've got that standard platform of field-enabled geospatial technology in place, the ideas that come from the field users, from the contractors, to improve collaboration, to improve efficiency, to improve safety, it becomes so much easier to just to innovate and do new things. So I think that the technology evolution, though it has a lot of challenges, and there were some really tall mountains to climb and get over. Multiple years of work with a dozen and a half people working every day for years on that. Those are challenges, but it opens up so much more possibilities, and that's really exciting for us.
How does your team work with the customer to ensure a successful venture? What kind of prep work is involved before taking on and initiating a project with someone?
So, our customers come to us in a few different ways. Sometimes it'll be through traditional RFP. Sometimes it'll be less formal, more exploratory. Maybe ultimately, like they'll pilot a couple of different technologies, and then they'll choose. Um, Oftentimes, we're talking with prospective customers um, for a long time before that project kicks off. So it's super important for us to feel like we really ask a lot of good questions and really understand as much as we can about their business to be prepared. It's understanding the day-to-day business of the operations department that you're working with, but it's also understanding the broader context of their IT posture, their GIS team. Do they have a big GIS team that is excited to add another application to their portfolio, or do they have a super stretched GIS team that really needs us to take care of things?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things to understand, and once you get into the project, hopefully with as much understanding as possible, collaboration is so important. We take an agile approach as much as we can to show our customers progress and let them give us feedback. So if we're configuring apps to tailor them to a specific workflow, um, getting that in front of them, getting the software in their hands, well before it's done, right, quote unquote done, is super important and is worked well. um, and then we try to encourage our customers to think about implementing technology into an area of their business, as varied and dynamic as like vegetation management or asset inspection and maintenance, is to think of it as making cumulative progress. And a lot of times, if these projects are, you know, if they're capital projects, I think that it's great to have the focus of the organization, um, and obviously a lot of benefits to being able to capitalize software projects. But I think it creates this situation where utilities feel like I've got one shot at this, right? I've got 6 months, or maybe it's a bigger project. I've got a couple years. I've got to swing for the fences and get everything I think I'll ever need. You know, because the company's going to tell me I can't change anything. With the products after that, and it can be done, but I think you can, if you try to tackle too many workflows, too many corners of your business, um, you know, in a short period of time, there's a risk that you can kind of miss some details. And so if we can, if the utility, if they can, if they can fit this into the way that they work, and to think about, you know, start with a couple of core workflows and then build on that over time, we find that they're able to really refine and perfect the application of the software product to the business problem much better if they're not having to think about half a dozen or a dozen different workflows at the same time.
Makes sense. Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you put a lot of consideration into making sure you're collaborating with a group or a customer or company who will be a really good fit with your goals and your specialty area? Do you try to make sure that you're paired up well with the customer, and that you guys have a very strategic approach to the problem that they're trying to solve?
We do try. I think it's important, and we have we've built an ecosystem of friends, partners, affiliates around us that do a lot of things that we don't do. So if we get into a conversation with a prospective customer, and we hear that kind of the first thing that they're trying to solve is not really core to what our products are designed to do, then we'll typically say, why don't we connect you with this company that that really specializes in remote sensing or UAV strategy, or that can help you with your core GIS implementation, and to not try to tackle something that maybe is not the best fit for us. So yeah, I mean, and it's hard. Look, when you're a private company and you're trying to grow, I mean, it can be hard to say no to opportunities. But we try to make sure that anything we're saying yes to, is a good fit for our products. That it's something that we can do, through our configuration framework. That's not going to require, kind of one-off custom code, if at all possible. And to try to make sure that alignment is there, because we have a number of customers that are coming up on 15 years of continuous use of Clearion, and we want customers that are really going to align with us for the long term, because I think that's when you can really generate so much value as they understand the capabilities, the technology, and we can work together over years.
So I'm thinking about Clearion and the team. You have a really great team that you've built, and the people that I've interacted with have always been, super friendly and super nice and just really go-getters. So when you're bringing someone new on to the team at Clearion, what do you look for, with a new person? Are there any particular traits that stand out to you as someone who's really going to be a success with your company, with Clearion?
Yeah, it's not unique to Clearion. I think that so many companies that are in the Esri ecosystem have to understand a lot of different things really well at the same time, and we're no exception. And it's hard to find someone that is an expert in potentially all the areas where you would want to be at least fluent to be able to talk about. So as much as possible, we look for people that are just passionate about some aspect of what we do. Maybe people aren't coming to us saying, my passion is to make it easier for utilities to improve the invoice payment process, right? I mean, it's great that we can do that, but maybe not where the real passion is, but connecting what we do, especially as these environmental and sustainability concerns have moved into the field operations space, that where we really focus so much of our product development. I think is making it easier for people to understand that the work we're doing in GIS and the work we're doing in utilities is really contributing to this much bigger thing that is on a lot of our minds of how do we work through the clean energy transition? How do we ensure that the grid is ready for the amount of electrical usage that's going to happen as not just cars go electric, but I mean even as industry becomes more electric. I have a customer in Canada they're working on a project to convert this massive steel mill in their town to electric.
Oh, wow.
And it's a not a big city. It's a city of not more than 100,000 people, and this one project is going to more than double their baseload overnight.
Wow.
And we're going to see that kind of thing happen all the time, and it's great because we're getting air pollution out of that city, and they're going to dramatically reduce the carbon footprint of that industry with this one transition. But there's some big things going on. How do we connect uh, wind and solar and other clean energy sources,
Mhm.
how do we connect that back? I mean, that's it's an engineering problem. It's a land use problem. It's a it's a public relations problem, and it's going to become you know a vegetation management, asset inspection and maintenance, and storm response, damage assessment problem down the road. And I think that like just having some passion to want to see the people that are on the front lines working for utilities, working for contractors, doing really hard work, doing dangerous work, are we helping them in some way? And I think that um, people that come to us and they can see their work making a difference in that way, it generates the energy and the positivity to do that hard work. So I guess a long way of saying we want people that are passionate, that are always learning, that don't want to get an answer to one thing and say, and now I know the answer, because either the answer is going to change down the road or the questions are going to change, but we need to be thinking about. And then just the technical skill set. I think just being able to like learning how to learn is super important, because again, with technology changing and regulations changing, with so many things changing, it really is important that everybody be able to kind of go find the information, the expertise, the knowledge that they need to continue to be current. We do as much teaching and education as we can, but I think there's still, not just for Clearion, but just across the board, thinking about even people coming into the workforce for the first time. I think it's so important to know how to learn new things as opposed to come into the job knowing a lot of things.
Mhm. I love that answer though. I think that's important as well. So Clarion has a regular presence at a lot of different conferences. You guys go to a lot of different places and talk to people about your company and what you do. How do you prepare for those events, for those engagements, and how do you make sure your team is ready to go to a particular or given event? And when you're presenting, or when you're presenting with a customer, how is it different for you versus when you're just kind of doing the expo area?
Yeah. One of the cool things about our company is that we get to live in the GIS world, so we get to go to the Esri conferences, and then we also get to go to these industry focused conferences where there'll be a completely different audience, right? So we get to spend some of our conference time with GIS professionals that are trying to think about how can they help you know the business units within their organizations solve problems, and then we get to spend time with the people in those business units. And I think that um, what we really want to be in a position to do is if someone comes to our booth and they want to talk, do we have something valuable to share? Not to be in sales mode, but is there some perspective? Is there some insight? Are there questions that we can ask that would prompt a valuable conversation? And then we tried, if at all possible, just try to think about a theme, maybe a theme for the year. Um, not to get like too philosophical, or too zoomed out too far, but are there some themes that we see that we can kind of foster conversations around? If it's secure contractor BYOD, if it's you know imagery management strategies, 3D visualization, just how do we fit into those larger conversations? We'll try to think about themes. um, there's no question that um, when our customers are presenting, at these conferences. Just the networking, just the value of those events in terms of us getting, meeting new people, talking to people that maybe we haven't talked to in a long time. I mean, it's such a noticeable difference, and I think it's just indicative of how collaborative this industry is. That the utility industry, the infrastructure industry in general, it doesn't move at lightning speeds in terms of technology transitions. There's a lot of great reasons for that. But what it does mean is that people talk to each other a lot, and when we see two customers that didn't know each other before a conference presentation, talking to each other afterwards and collaborating and thinking about great ideas or solving problems together, that's awesome, because they'll think of things, they'll solve problems that maybe we haven't even thought about through that collaboration. So we wish that we could have our customers always talk instead of us, because they do so much better of a job than we do.
It is a super collaborative space, that's for sure. It feels like you know, the partners, the distributors, the Esri folks, and the customers, like everybody just, has really good conversations. We work together, trying to make sure people are solving their problems and doing amazing work in this field. And it feels like we just all kind of work together to keep pushing the envelope forward,
Yeah, absolutely.
I love seeing what new things people are coming up with. We were talking yesterday with someone about it, and just the different ways that customers use the technology, and they'll do things that we could have never dreamed up and could have never imagined, and they use it in ways to solve problems that we at Esri would not have imagined and didn't think of. And we just are continually amazed by what people are out there doing, and how much they're pushing the envelopes. It's super cool.
It is. It is. I feel like it's happening like more now than it ever has, which is just fantastic.
Absolutely. So where do you see GIS and geospatial technology heading in the future? What do you feel like the future is for us?
So it reminds me of a story that I'll keep short, but when I was at the previous company, we were building the desktop tools for network modeling. We were partnered with this company that actually went out to the field with a GPS backpack, and they would map the poles and build a really spatially accurate data to put into the GIS. And we had a lot of mutual customers. I was talking to one of the sales guys. This is probably 20 or 25 years ago, and he said, "Man, what are we going to do when we map all the poles?" And I said, "That's a good question." And I think, we both were like, are we going to run out of stuff to do? And just looking back on that, just how silly it is. I tell you, like when you had, when you had paper maps of your land base and your assets, which might sound, like, for people that have been in the industry for 5 or 10 years, like, it sounds crazy, but I was a grown up when I was an adult when most utilities that I went to, they only had paper maps. But like getting that digitized, and like, it didn't actually really matter if the poles were in the right place, in space, like as long as like your poles lined up relatively well with your roads, it's like you could have this map that it wasn't particularly accurate. And then I think like when you started to see like third-party base maps come in, and like the idea that you could turn on a satellite image or turn on a nice base map that you didn't have to draw yourself, which I remember customers like building their own road network maps with GPS in the 90s. And suddenly, like, where those poles are, where the assets are, like in real, geographically accurate, like it just became glaring. right? And so you had this move, and just became important. Like we need our assets to be in the right place. And so a lot of utilities have, they've improved that geospatial accuracy. And I thought, is there ever going to be a real justification for like having a 3D model of your distribution network, right? It's like, gosh, that seems pretty far-fetched. And now we're meeting with utility companies that are getting 3D models of vegetation canopy, very low cost from pictures that were taken by satellites. And the big question then becomes is, well, if I know where the trees are in space, in 3D space, where are my conductors, and where are my cross arms? So I think this drive, and if you ask the people at Esri that sit around and think about this a lot every day as their job, they're like, yeah, no kidding, Chris. Of course, good 3D visual representation. But it's there, and it's there today. I think that one place where we're not working right now, but I can see is just having the work that we're helping our customers manage, in an augmented reality environment, where you're looking in 3D space at the trees, the branches that need to be removed. I could see that coming. Yeah, I think there's a kind of the next layer of kind of problems that this technology is going to allow us to help us begin to solve.
What does the future look like for Clearion?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it makes me wonder if I'm going to need to answer this one twice, Melissa. But yes, between me and you and Remy, I got to that question in the prep, and I'm like, how do I want to answer this? So what does the future look like for Clearion? I feel like in a lot of ways we're like barely getting started on some of these challenges. I think that the the future of our business is largely going to be impacted by the trends that affect the industry in general. I think we've talked about some of those. I think that what I would love to see as the future of Clearion is that we have a significant role within the community of companies that include Esri that are trying to solve these infrastructure challenges. How do we design and build and maintain infrastructure that's going to be resilient, it's going to be sustainable, in the sense of that it's transmitting electricity in the case of electric utilities, from sustainable sources, and that it's being done in a way that is not adversely impacting the surrounding environment. And I think that there's some opportunities for the field operations work like that, and that's what Clearion is really doing. Is we're focusing on, for the most part, managing work that happens out in the field, along rights of ways, around or to assets. Is where does all of that information live, right? Because we have GIS. Pretty much every utility has a GIS, and every utility has some sort of work management, finance management system. And I think that as work is getting digitized, and so much of this work is kind of obviously um, geospatial in nature because it is out in the field. Um, I think there's going to be this interesting um, like just decision point. I'm trying to think of how to say it. I think there's going to be this interesting um, uh, collision of these enterprise technologies where we're going to have to think about how do you blend together enterprise asset management, enterprise work management, enterprise financial management with enterprise GIS.
Mhm.
And I suspect that the answer to that question is going to be that the geospatial nature of this is going to continue to be important, maybe like the fundamental aspect of it. Especially as you see these GPS enabled remote sensing technologies, and who knows what other types of sensors they're going to come into the industry. And so I would love for Clearion to really be a part of solving that problem, to where kind of the domain of EAM and ERP or enterprise work management and the traditional domain of GIS somehow like blend together through new ways of thinking about work that's happening in the industry. So maybe that might be a little too too zoomed out of an answer, but if I'm let my hair down, so to speak, and try to think big, I think that's one area where I hope we're players in helping solve that problem for the industry.
No, that's a totally fine answer. I'm just curious about what are y'all looking into, So hey, that's awesome. Oh, too funny. So, well, those are all the questions that I'd put together. We worked through this daunting list of them, Chris. And so before we wrap up today, I just want to open it up for you for any final thoughts, anything else that we didn't cover that you want to mention, anything else about Clearion that we didn't cover and didn't have a chance to talk about.
Well, I'll listen to this and just wonder why the heck I didn't say a few things, but nothing's leaping to mind. I think it's so cool that you're doing this. I personally am a major podcast consumer, and I think it's cool to see the content coming together. That's really applicable for what's still a fairly niche industry. And yeah, appreciate you including me, thinking of me, and let me spend some time with you today, and keep it going, Melissa. Love it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the fact that it's resonating and that you're enjoying it and that you were willing to come on here, because I knew we'd have a really good conversation. I knew you'd have some good things to share. And I feel like the listeners will really appreciate hearing, more about Clearion, more about your journey. People have really been they've been enjoying hearing the kind of behind the keyboard view, the people learning about more about the people behind the tech and the GIS. And so I think it's been super fun for me to get to know people better. And I just appreciate you coming on. And we got to know you a little bit better today, Chris.
Yeah, it was so fun. Thanks
Absolutely.
again, Melissa.
Thank you so much. We'll definitely see you in San Diego and swing by and find out what new things are going on.
Yeah, tell Remy I said bye.
I will. He's here. Yeah.
See you guys.
That wraps up today's episode. Please feel free to reach out with your comments, or if you have an interesting topic that you would like to hear, please let us know. Thanks again for your time, and tune in for our next podcast.